Back when I was 21, I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a bed. What I had was the backseat of a car. I had just come home from prison. I was fresh out of a toxic relationship, and the world didn't exactly roll out a red carpet for me. And for over a year, actually, my car wasn't transportation, which I was blessed to have in the first place and was able to acquire through nothing short of a miracle. But it was survival at the end of the day. It was the place I ate, I prepared all my meals, the place I tried to sleep at night, and the place I thought about whether life was even worth it, you know, as unfortunate as that is to admit. But I suppose this is the story of how I got there and what it really felt like at the time. So, taking you guys back to the beginning, I had unfortunately made a series of bad decisions, right? Of course, on my own accord. I'm not about to shift the blame or put it onto anybody else and act like, oh, it's their fault or somebody else's fault or I'm just a product of my environment or anything. The truth is, I grew up in you could say a relatively stable household, right? Coming from a military family, all male. It was just me, my dad, my brother. There was structure there, right? So I'm not knocking my upbringing, and I've even told my parents before that they shouldn't blame themselves or even question themselves as to how I ended up in some of the predicaments that I did, because that was just me forging my own path, right? For better or for worse. That was my decision making. And I didn't want them questioning the effort they had made in raising me. Now, by they, specifically, I mean first and foremost my father, but also my grandparents, right? My Mimi, my Papa, because that was essentially home base in upstate New York, Rochester. If you're familiar with the area, it's kind of just a a dead city, similar to Detroit. I'm not dissing or anything. It's just it was an old industrial city. And once we kind of outgrew the industrial revolution and that kind of things, and industry started shipping overseas, it just started to decline, right? Um, and I guess more accurately, you could say I'm from a town, outside a city. Okay, I'm from Ontario. Um, it's a very quiet place. It's a very low key place. Not a lot going on. Everybody knows everybody, kind of thing. There's like one high school, one middle school, one elementary school. You get the gist. And that lies just on the outskirts of Webster, which is a small but slightly larger town, which lies on the outskirts of Rochester, where I would spend a lot of time with those who were older than me and obviously being influenced by that, but also being excited by what I found out there. The things that I was into, the things that I was seeing, and the behaviors and habits that I began to adopt, right? So I do want to preface this by saying if anybody in my family sees this, right, it's not your fault. It's just kind of what drew me in at the time. But I ended up in prison, to keep a long story short, with a rack of violent charges. Um, right, firearms charges, the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, conspiracy to commit robbery, the whole nine. And this was really just me kind of living through a daze at the time. I was still very much coming of age, and I had started getting into things that you really shouldn't be getting into at that time. I don't know if I want to get into the details here in this video. Maybe I'll make another one, but I was doing a lot of things that you shouldn't do, especially at such a young age. But, being around older people, especially those more involved in said things, it just kind of happened that way. But it all came to a T, and I ended up in prison. And total, because I had gotten arrested and bonded out and then caught a new charge and ended up beating one case and bonding out for the other. And then when it came time for sentencing, where I ended up doing just over 2 years straight, I had already done about a year in various jails, touching, I believe, two. And when I came home, fast forwarding, it was very weird. It was very interesting because, for one, this was during COVID, right? I had gotten locked up, and only a couple months into it, the pandemic started and things began to be shut down. And I just remember me and all the guys who used to turn on the evening news and stuff, we would see these empty stretches of highway, not a, excuse me, not a single car, not a single person. We would see these, aerial views, maybe drone footage of shopping centers and things. And there wasn't a soul, there wasn't a single person, but it was kind of weird from our perspective at the time because obviously we weren't living through that. We were all in one area behind walls and fences, and beyond that, even more fences. And we didn't really have that same experience. The world outside of our mini world was changing. It was changing drastically, and it was changing rapidly, right? So first and foremost, there was that. And when it came time for me to eventually come home, that was just one of many things that didn't make the transition so easy, right? I thought at the time I was doing a good thing by surprising my dad with my return, right? I happened to be dating somebody at the time. Even while I was in prison, I will get to why that was very stupid of me. But I happened to be dating somebody at the time, and they agreed to help facilitate this surprise, this kind of impromptu homecoming, if you will. So I came home. I spent about a day or two at the beach. This was down in the Virginia Beach area. Very shitty beach. I don't recommend it at all. 0 out of 10. Disgusting, seaweed everywhere. When you think beach, you think something like the Bahamas, crystal clear water, Fiji, right? St. Lucia, areas like this. Virginia Beach, Ocean City, Maryland, these places are fucking disgusting and 100% worth avoiding. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. So I ended up spending a couple days at the beach just because I was fresh home and it was such a drastic change that I wanted to experience it. So we did. And afterwards, I decided to show up at my dad's new apartment with his also new wife. And I just, for the life of me, cannot forget the look on his face when he opened the door, because it was not one of surprise in a how would I say this? It was not one of surprise in a good way, I guess. Um, it was really kind of, he was really kind of taken aback, right? I mean, the shock was genuine. And that immediately just kind of put a foul taste in my mouth, right? I mean, just within seconds of the door flinging open, it was really like, holy shit, why are you here? Kind of thing, almost as if I was interrupting something. Not that anything was going on, it was just that was the vibe. Like, sorry to intrude, your eldest son coming home, thinking I'm doing something good, only to be met with just a lack of understanding, maybe. So I say that to say this. From there, it wasn't exactly easy to move in, right? Move in with my dad and his now wife. So I thought it would be worthwhile to go and stay at my now ex's parents' house, which I know if you've seen any television show or even just think about it for 2 seconds, that sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? Moving in with quote unquote in laws. We weren't married or anything, but it's essentially the same thing. I thought that was a good idea, right? I thought that would give me stability. I thought that would give me not necessarily a head start in terms of I would have received the help from her parents that I otherwise expected from mine. Kind of to the contrary. It was just a place to lay my head. It was somewhat familiar, and they actually did embrace me. They accepted me with open arms, especially her father. Her father was a dad of all girls. So I was essentially, the son he never had. And he actually expressed that to me one time. We actually got on quite well. It's kind of unfortunate how things unraveled just because it was so bad, it was so toxic. But, he was a good guy, and I do appreciate what he was able to do for me at the time. I really do, because, again, my mind was just moving 1,000 miles a second in this period. But I end up moving in with them, and it's okay initially. It's all right. As I said, they've accepted me. They were very accommodating. But the problem was their daughter. Their problem was my ex at the time. Well, my ex now, but who I was seeing at the time. That was the real issue, because come to find out, as is the case a lot of the time when you're locked up and you have somebody on the outside, unfortunately, 8 or 9 times out of 10, they're not yours. They might be playing the part, they might be picking up the phone, but outside of that, their world continues to move forward while yours is put on pause. Okay? As soon as that 30-minute phone call ends, they go back to living life as normal, and you go back to your cell. Very different worlds. We're both being exposed to very different things, in very different, varying degrees, right? So as I'm watching the world change through a television screen, she was experiencing it. Not only that, but just took it upon herself to act as though she was single while I was away, which again is just all too common. It's unfortunate. It speaks more about your character than it does anything else, right? I would have much preferred that you didn't pretend and just said, this is what it is. Stop calling and block the number, right? That is a hard pill to swallow, but it's easier to accept in a way than believing that somebody was being honest with you the entire time, only to find out that you were being betrayed the entire time. So, having found that out post release, I mean, really stumbling upon it myself, um, kind of just like lit a fuse in me in a way. And that started what would become the inevitable downfall of the entire relationship, right? Of course, when you don't have many things going for you, you try to excuse certain things, you try to, shoulder things that you wouldn't otherwise. But at the time, I thought, what option do I have? I can't go home being with my father because he has a new wife, over a decade younger than him, but even younger mentally. And just, we never got along. We never clicked, right? I've always been cordial. I've never been disrespectful, never called anybody out of their name to their face or anything. I was raised right. I have manners, this kind of thing, but we just never clicked. It was never there. There was no genuine relationship as much as my dad would have liked for that to have been established. I just couldn't do it, man. I can't fake it, right? I don't know if I have too much expression in my face or something. I really just cannot fake it. If I don't like you, I don't like you. I'm not going to pretend, right? And I really would appreciate if those around me, I'm sure like many others, wouldn't expect that of me. So that wasn't an option. And because of all of these hills and roadblocks, I don't even know if roadblocks is the most accurate way to describe this, but these unfortunate turn of events that I found in my relationship at the time, I still had decided to kind of stick with it because, again, what option did I have? That was until I was, by some miracle, able to get my first car to date. That was my first car. Prior to that, I was driving around my dad's Nissan Altima. Yes, I do admit I was whipping it like it was my own, but it wasn't. Um, so I was able to get my first car. And a lot of people, um, kind of on a side note, I had posted a TikTok before that did go semi viral where I was living out of my car and I got a lot of shit for it because the car I was living out of happened to be a Lexus RX 350. But what people don't understand is that I, when I went to go get a car, I wanted an SUV. Okay. I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'2". I can't exactly fit comfortably into a Honda Civic. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but it's not the most comfortable thing in the world. So, big man thing. I wanted an SUV. I had my eyes set on, I believe it was a 2010 Honda CRV. And what ended up happening was I thought I had this locked in, but the day that I went in, I was told, maybe this was a swindle, maybe this was a sales tactic. I don't know. But I was told by the salesman that that very same day, only hours before me, somebody had came and made an offer and they were able to secure that. Uh, that being the Honda CRV. So they drove that off the lot. And I simply said, what else is in my budget? Right? I didn't have all that much money to put down. I think I had 1,500 at the time to put down, which was actually split into two payments. I mean, the guy really worked with me. Granted, this was a guaranteed approval price, so you can only imagine the interest rate I got with this purchase. But I was able to split my down payment into two separate payments, totaling, I believe, 1,500. And he had showed me this Lexus and said it was within my budget. Okay, cool. I didn't even care that it was a Lexus. I wasn't aiming for a Lexus, right? I'm not a name brand kind of guy. I do appreciate that it's Toyota made. I'm definitely a Toyota guy. So it just kind of worked out in that sense. But that wasn't what I had gone in there for. It's just how it worked out. Anyway, I was able to get that. And again, the relationship at the time began uh, continued to deteriorate until a final breaking point. At the time, what I was doing for income, I was working at UPS, which I really thought was a great job. I thought it was a good company. I was in the warehouse and I had no complaints. I believe I was making 19 an hour, but we were also getting time and a half. And this was during kind of peak season, right? Not quite like weeks before Christmas, but kind of leading up to it. And I was making good money for kind of the first time in my life, because prior to that, I held a lot of kind of bullshit jobs, like just being a host at a restaurant or even being a server once I was 18. But that was more of like a front for why I had money, because I was also, selling certain things that you can put in little baggies at the time, right? And I did need an excuse for the money that I had. So being a server was the perfect job because I didn't care if I made $20 in tips. I had other income streams, if you will. But I had gotten this Lexus because I was working at UPS making somewhat decent money. And we had decided to try and get our own place, only to find out the only thing we could really afford was a basement, right? Furnished basement, but kind of studio style. The bed was where the kitchen was and everything. You know what a studio is. So I'm working at UPS. I'm going in at 12:30, 1 in the morning. We were kind of finishing out about 9 or so. That's when the drivers started to show up. We're loading the trucks and everything. And then afterwards, I would go out and do gig work. I would do things like Instacart or Shipped, right? Just to kind of supplement some extra income. So this is how I was able to make the down payment and everything. I was able to get the car. No longer had to rely on anybody else, because that used to be held over my head, believe it or not. Some people will use things like that against you. That's why I am very hesitant to accept favors from anybody, even though on the surface, it seems like they mean well. It seems like they might actually want to help you. I find that it's all too common for those same people to turn around at a later date and throw those very favors they had done for you back in your face and expect something in return. And me personally, I just don't believe that's why you do a favor for somebody. You do it from the bottom of your heart. You do it because you genuinely want to assist somebody, not necessarily for something in return. Now, if you have something going on where I do you a favor, you do me a favor, and you kind of have that like silent agreement, it's never actually been spoken, but that's kind of how you work. That's kind of how you've conducted yourself within the relationship. I mean, I've had homeboys where it was kind of an unspoken rule where, you show up at Chipotle, hey, I got this. I got this one, bro. Don't worry about it. And then next time, I don't even have to ask, nor do I have the expectation, but he got it. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So I was really tired of that being held over my head, the constant rides, the constant dependency on others. I was really tired of that. I was ready to be my own man. I was ready to take on my own responsibility. And I was able to achieve that by getting this car. So I'm in the basement. I'm working at UPS. I'm doing Shipped. I'm doing Instacart. I'm doing gig work, right? Naturally, as you could assume, I'm going into work at 1 in the morning, and 8, 9 o'clock rolls around. I'm going home, showering, changing, and then going right out and doing gig work, only to repeat it the very next morning. You can imagine how tired I was, right? So, and this was nothing out of the ordinary. It was during an argument, you could say. It was during a point of contention, which was all too common. where uh, while I was being yelled at, screamed at for whatever, I don't even remember. It's not relevant. I'm sure it was literally nothing, even at the time. I'm sitting there on the couch and I actually fall asleep. I mean, I'm struggling to keep my eyes open. I'm exhausted physically. When I had came home initially, I had lost weight naturally, even though I was eating things like commissary and stuff. There's only so many packets of chicken flavored ramen noodles you can eat um, before you go insane. So, you could say that I was weak at the time. I was weaker. I appeared more frail. I wasn't as filled out. And I was just tired, dude. Just a constant back and forth conveyor belt truck, conveyor belt truck. That's how these warehouses operate, at least UPS. Um, I was exhausted, dude. I was literally falling asleep while being scolded. And the last straw for me was when I was awoken by a cup of water to the face. I mean, like, imagine drowning on a couch, right? That was the last straw. That was it. I was done. I had literally, from that moment, after, wiping my face, getting the tap water out of my eyes, the fucking fluoride out of my vision, threw what I could in a couple handfuls into a duffel bag, and I never looked back. And that was that. Quite honestly, that was that. And from that moment forward, I began living in my car. I began doing what is called stealth camping. Excuse me. I began watching videos on how people live in their car. What should you get? What kind of things should you invest in? Right? Things like batteries that you can charge while you're driving around or through an outlet, coolers, things like this, portable stoves, how to cook out of your trunk, or going to public parks and setting up, again, the same portable propane stove and making ramen noodles or eggs, or I was even going to Walmart and buying the pre-packaged hard-boiled eggs, probably full of hormones, but I didn't care. It was affordable. It was like $4. I got a gym membership, so I was able to shower after work. Where I was still at UPS at the time, so I was able to shower after work, and that just became my life. That became my routine. I would go to work. I would finish. I'd be all sweaty from that. I'd go to the gym. I had no energy to lift weights or anything. I would just kind of walk in with my duffel bag, my towel on my shoulder, and just go straight to the showers. I'm sure this was noticed, but at the time, I mean, I didn't even care. And if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't care today. You do what you have to do. I'm not knocking anybody's lifestyle, or belittling the situation that anybody finds themselves in. Some people today can only save money if they live in their car, and there are ways to do it where you can be more comfortable than you would imagine, believe it or not. But that definitely taught me that even the ones you think are there for you or will never leave, um, it taught me to question that seriously, and to not be so blinded by what has been, right? We've been friends for X amount of time, therefore, we are inseparable. The bond is unbreakable. That was really brought into question because I had people who I had considered brothers who I thought I would take a bullet for, and I meant that, right? And you would hear that, you would get the sense that that was reciprocated. But when it really comes down to it, people make time for the things they want to do, okay? And even with all of the excuses that they might try to give you, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to help you, they will. If somebody wants to be in your life, they will be, regardless of what they say, right? It's that simple. And it really opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of these people you or myself may call brothers or sisters, or that is my ride or die. I would do anything for them and they would do anything for me. My only advice to that is try to take a step back and maybe be a little realistic, right? Because a lot of these things that are said are just said because it sounds nice, right? And doesn't it? Doesn't it sound nice to tell your homeboy that you'd take a bullet for them and then to hear that they would also do the same for you? Of course, it sounds nice. But saying it isn't the test. The test is when the moment comes where you need to back up that claim. And all too often, unfortunately, people fall short of this, right? And that was one of the things I learned by living in my car. I also learned resilience. I also learned how to live a very minimalist lifestyle, right? Everything I had, everything I owned had to be able to fit in my car and not just thrown in the trunk or back seat because where would I sleep, you know? So I downsized a lot. I realized what was important, what wasn't. Um, and I will say this. If you don't have to live in your car, obviously I wouldn't recommend that you do, because why would you do that if it's not absolutely necessary? However, if you do find yourself in a situation or circumstance where that has become or is about to become your reality, it's not the end of the world, actually. It's not. It it allows you, how do I want to say this? It allows you to really get to know yourself. It allows you to really observe the things that you do, right? To be very mindful of your purchases, of how you spend your time, right? Because there's a lot of excess time when you're not at work. What are you doing? I had a laptop at the time, but I could only use it on public Wi-Fi. I had a phone, but that could die, and I had to drive around to charge up this big battery that I would then use to charge my devices. So there's many inconveniences that come with it, but it does teach you a lot of things about yourself and the immediate world around you. So I do think there's a lot of valuable lessons to be learned when embarking on a journey such as living in your car, right? And especially for any length of time, if you live in your car for a month because you got kicked out, but you were able to be taken in by a friend or something, I don't think you will learn some of these things uh, as easily if you were to instead spend, like I did, over a year in your car, And I guess by the end of it, it really just becomes about these small wins. You know, Continue to move forward, make these small, short term, achievable goals in order to mark your progress, right? Yes, you should have big ideas, you should have long term goals, but in order to reach those, you have to focus on said short term goals, right? Like, how do I get out of the car? How do I go from living in my car to moving in somewhere? How do I make that happen? What are my options here? Right? And you start to become a lot more resourceful. And eventually, through a friend of mine who I had actually met when I was locked up, this is the crazy part about being locked up. Even though there's a lot of degenerates, even though there's a lot of losers. There's a lot of burnouts. There's a lot of repeat offenders. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I have met who were on like their fourth or fifth prison bid. I mean, just unbelievable. You know, that one time there was a genuine wake up call. I had done time in jail before that, but I was beating my charges. I was getting off. I was, getting a slap on the wrist in some cases. I had never even got probation for some of the cases I ended up in jail for, you know. But going to prison, that was a wake up call because just think about it. Think about the people there. In jail, you have offenders who are there for the weekend, who are there because they were drunk and disorderly, who might spend one night in a drunk tank. If you've ever gotten a DUI, you know what I'm talking about. Excuse me. You might be there for a week or 90 days. You know, there was a lot of guys who had missed child support payments and things like that. And they were short timers. You're just passing through. But when you go to prison, this is the big leagues. This is where you meet people who aren't going home for a decade, who have a lot more serious charges. I remember meeting a guy who ended up where I was through good behavior. He was able to lower his classification, but he was what do they call it? He wasn't guilty of murder, but he was I forget the word, but he was essentially a part of what took place. Not the one who pulled the trigger, but kind of helped facilitate it. And he had done 30 years, so this kind of thing really puts it into perspective. When you meet people like this and you hear their stories, that was the wake up call that I needed. I tell anybody today, did it suck? Absolutely. It was a horrible experience, but it was also one that now I am able to cherish. Obviously, at the time, it feels like the world is ending, but now I actually value what I learned and what I was able to take away from it, and the abilities, or rather, the ability to grow from having gone through that experience. But I was finally, circling back, able to find a place through somebody I had met in prison. And I guess that was my initial point, is that some of the people I've met in some of the worst circumstances I've gone through have actually turned out to be some of the realest people I could surround myself with, and it sounds counterintuitive to an extent, right? You would think that if you're out here in the world, surrounding yourself by other people who are out here in the world, this is as genuine as it gets. But I think it takes somebody going through the struggle, whatever the case may be, to really understand the struggle of others. I guess one example might be, I've heard stories of friends of mine who are in the trades where, let's say you're an electrician and you go and do some work in a wealthy neighborhood, right? And they have just described to me how these people who have 3-4 car garages, 2 Porsches in the driveway, 5-bedroom, 4.5 bath residences, who actually turn out to be some of the cheapest people you can meet. Almost like a hair away from not even paying for your service. They want constant discounts. They're always trying to lower the price. Whereas you go to your local trailer park and they will give you half of the meal on their plate if they find out you haven't eaten in 4 hours, right? So my point is, as crazy as it sounds, sometimes the realest people you meet are from the most unfortunate walks of life. So through him, I was able to get a job in a different location. I had to end up leaving UPS because Unfortunately, they cut hours, they decreased the pay. It was a whole lot of fuckery going on. You know, you went from a decent paycheck to what the hell is this for the work that I'm doing, as you know, we're all kind of experiencing today. But it's neither here nor there. I was able to get a job at a new location, and through that job, through that employer, I was able to get a room in a house. And, you know, for one reason or another, that ended up not working out, but it was a start. And I can say that from that point, I have never had to go back to my car. And I guess that is the point I'm trying to make. No matter where you find yourself, you should always be striving for more. You should always be trying to better it. You shouldn't be consumed by self pity, self doubt, or woe is me, or um, you know, just getting caught up in how easy it is to just complain about your circumstances and where you find yourself. Because the reality is, no matter your position in life, you should never be looking up. And what I mean by that is there will always be somebody doing better than you. And to compare yourself to them, you will convince yourself that you are lesser than. You should be looking down. And I don't mean that in the sense that those who are below you or find themselves in more unfortunate circumstances to look down on them because of said circumstances. That's not what I mean. I mean, look at where they're at and look at where you're at. Where you're at might be bad, but just know that somebody somewhere, even in your own country, would kill for your position. Quite literally. And we should never forget that, right? We should continue to move forward as best as we can. We should always want more for ourselves. We should never settle for the mundane or the mediocre, you know. And I understand that some people's capabilities are more or less than that of others, but still, I think when you become content is when all progression stops. And to an extent, a healthy extent, we should never become content with our circumstances, right? We should always be bettering it for first and foremost ourselves, but also those around you, especially if you have people relying on you. You have kids, you have family, you have people that you need to take care of or under your care or you're responsible for. So, with that being said, I just want to say that again, I'm thankful for the things that I have experienced and the things that I've gone through, such as living in my car post prison, because it has opened my eyes to who I am, but more so what I'm capable of, you know? And maybe I won't build the next rocket ship that sends people to Mars that eventually colonize it. You know what I mean? I'm not Elon Musk or anything, but I have proven to myself, much like you can prove to yourself, that as long as you show up every day and you really put your mind to it and you put the work in, things will happen for you. Your life can change. It is very possible. You just need a plan. You need discipline to stick to that plan. And you just need to show up every day. Consistency is king. That's it. Consistency beats out talent every day. Every day. Hard work will always beat out natural talent. Now, those who excel, superstars, right? You think Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, people like this, Wayne Gretzky, for my hockey fans out there. Yes, that is a lot of natural talent in combination with hard work. Okay. And I guess I will end it with that. You know, you can always take control of your life and change your circumstances. It just takes one, the desire, and two, the understanding that there will be work involved. And you just need to accept that and stick to it, right? But I'm Wicks the Board. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Those of you that did, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you've gone through something similar, how you got through it, how you were able to overcome it. And with that being said, I'm gone. Y'all take it easy.